So before we get started talking about the text again, I do just want to say a couple of things about the midterm exam that's coming up in 2 weeks, right? So first, the date on the syllabus currently is the 27th for the midterm exam. I'm actually going to push it forward to the 29th. So we're going to sort of move that forward one extra day. So the exam will actually be on the 29th, mostly because I just think that kind of splits the course content up into neater chunks. I'll explain in a moment. But yes, the exam will be on the 29th. I have already updated the syllabus on my home computer, and I'll upload that to Georgia View when I get home today. But yeah, so the midterm will be on September 29th. Due date for the paper will remain the same. Now, as far as what the midterm is going to look like, it's going to be in two parts, right? The first part is going to be a short essay, right? You are going to choose one of 3 essay questions to answer in sort of about 3 to 5 pages of blue book paper. Right, now when I say pages, right, this is a page, this is a page, right? So sides of a page is what we're talking about. I will provide the blue books because, frankly, I think it's bullshit that they make you pay for them. I've never worked at a place before where they made students pay for blue books. So those will be provided. Part 2 will be identification. So I'll give you 12 terms. You'll choose 8 of them, and you will provide the name of the text to which the term is connected, the name of the author, and a paragraph describing or defining the term. All of these terms will be drawn from class discussion. Right, so I'm not going to give you a set of sample terms to study because that should all be in your notes. Right? I'm not going to put anything on the exam that we didn't talk about directly in class. So everything you need for the identification section will be in your notes, and if you're confused about anything, you can always go back to the YouTube channel and watch the videos, right? To get anything you might have missed.
What's the YouTube channel?
Pardon?
What's your YouTube channel?
Just search on my name, and it'll come up. I can send you a link to it as well. I did send a link earlier in the semester, but yeah, I can send it to you again if you just email me a reminder.
I don't think I got the email because I looked for it.
Okay, email me to remind me to send it to you, and I will do so. Okay, so I will give you sample essay questions. They won't be the exact questions that will be on the exam, but they will be very similar to the questions that will be on the exam. So it'll give you a sense of sort of what broad themes you should be prepared to discuss, what sorts of things you should probably focus on when you're studying. Give you the chance to write, maybe write a practice essay or two, so that when you come to take the exam, you'll be prepared. I'll get those to you next week. So does anybody have any questions about the exam?
The paragraphs you want to start the terms.
Yeah.
How big paragraphs do you want?
I would say, yeah, give me like a fairly substantial paragraph, right? Like give me like 3 to 5 sentences, right? Not just one little, this person is blah, right? I would like a decent fleshed out description. Oh yeah, Sydney, go ahead.
Is it going to be like opinionated, like we describe this character in these stories, and like the in-class?
Okay, you don't have to make an argument in the identifications, right? What you do have to do is prove to me that you know what it is, right? That's all you're aiming to do with those. Yeah, Ash.
Okay, so when we make the identification, we're supposed to
Uh-huh.
have, like, say the name of the text, the name of the author, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
If we say, I don't know, don't put the author, even by mistake, or
Mhm.
is it everything just going to be wrong, or
No.
just going to like take it out?
Each of these is going to be worth. There are 8 of them. They're worth 5 points each. So like this is 40% of the grade. This is going to be 60% of the grade. Right? So each individual ID is going to be worth 5 points. 1 point for the author, 1 point for the text, 3 points for the definition. So if you get the author wrong, you lose a point. If you get the text wrong, you lose a point. If you get the description wrong, you lose 3 points. Yeah, Valerie?
What about spelling?
I'm not too terribly worried about spelling.
Like the author's names and stuff?
Yeah, if I can tell what you mean, then and that you know what you mean, then that's fine. Yeah, if you, for example, don't remember how to spell Xueqin, that's okay, right? Just so that I can tell that you know broadly what you're talking about. Yeah, Sarah.
When we're writing the first part in
Mhm.
essay style.
Right.
So do we need like an introduction with our points in it, and then discuss those points, like a paper kind of?
Yeah, I'm looking for sort of like, what I'm looking for is more sort of like what you're doing in the in-class writings in a longer, bigger scale, right? You'll probably be comparing more than one text. And yeah, you'll be discussing some sort of broad theme that's already set by the question. So yeah, you will need to make some kind of argument in the essay. Right? It's not going to be enough in the essay to summarize, right? I'm not just looking for evidence that you did the reading, I'm looking for evidence that you actually did some thinking about this and have something to say about it.
So we can put our opinions in it?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, as long as they're, let me put it like I tend not to use the word opinions because opinions technically sort of refers to unsupported gut feelings that we have about things, right? What I'm looking for you are arguments, right? Arguments are like opinions but actually supported with evidence. Yes, Casey.
Can you explain completely?
Pardon?
Can you explain completely?
Oh, okay, yeah, like those exam books they sell in the bookstore. That's what those are. Yeah, you don't actually need to worry about what that is. They'll be here. And if you happen to need more than one, right, I'll have extras. But yeah, I'll provide those for you. They're about yay big. If that helps.
So like read over all the things, or like will you tell us which like essay is coming out of, or like what text?
The essays can come out of, like, the essay questions will often refer to a couple of different texts. So it is going to be a good idea for you to be more or less conversant with everything that we've read. Now, does this mean go back and reread everything? That's probably not going to be the most effective way to study, right? You might want to reread particular passages that you think are relevant to the themes in the sample questions, and certainly go back over your notes. And I would also suggest that when you're studying for the IDs, one of the best things to do there is to make yourself flashcards, right? Pick up concepts that we've talked about in class, right? Okay, so, what is a scholar beauty romance, right? What is optimism? Who is Leibniz? Things like that. And, write the term on one side of the card, and then, author, text, definition on the other side. And that should help you out with that. Yes, Sarah, you had a question as well.
Yeah, for the essay question, definitions, you said that it was you pulled information from all the texts, like a specific thing.
Yeah.
So when we write our argument, we can refer to all the different texts, not just one?
Usually, the questions will be worded in such a way as to get you to sort of maybe compare two texts to each other, right? If you're trying to talk about everything we've read in a 3 to 5 page essay, right, you're just not going to be able to do it. You're going to be all over the place. So you're going to have to try to remain focused probably on maybe 2 really good examples. And some of the questions will also just sort of be more appropriate for some texts than others. Yeah, Valerie.
Okay, what did you say like the terms would be again for the identification, like broad?
Yeah, could be characters, could be places, could be historical names or events, could be theoretical concepts or categories, things like that we've talked about, right? Basically, if you go through your notes, anything that you think could be an ID question may very well be one, right? Anything that you could, like a single short word or phrase that is an identifiable thing. So to give you an example of how I want you to answer these, right? So say I give you as a term Pangloss. How do we answer this?
Give the text, read that he's from, the author.
Yep, okay. Text is Candide. Author is Voltaire, yes, good. And then who is Pangloss?
A philosopher.
He's a philosopher,
Everything happens for a reason.
an optimist who believes everything happens for a reason. And what's that?
All tongue or something like that?
I'm sorry?
Is that the one where his name means all tongue?
Yeah, his name means all tongue. That's another kind of detail you could add to this, right? And the other thing you would need to add to this is what his actual importance is in the text, what his actual role is in the text. So he's a philosopher whose name means all tongue. He believes that everything happens for the best possible reason. And then you would probably have to discuss how he relates to the basic point of Voltaire's argument, right? Right, Pangloss is sort of his useful idiot character. Right, the guy who's always wrong about everything. Okay, any other questions about the exam? No? Oh yeah, go ahead, Jonathan.
You said how he's relative to the text.
Relevant.
Relevant to the text.
Mm-hmm.
Never mind.
Okay, yeah, essentially what role does he fill in the text, right?
So like we would say that he's essentially was made to be a parody of the very philosophy that Voltaire was trying to drag.
Exactly.
Stuff like that.
Yeah. He's a parody of a rationalist optimist philosopher. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Anything else? Yes, Casey.
For our terms identification, you won't pick something like enlightenment that came up in your different texts with you.
Okay. If it's a term that could apply to different texts, then I will accept any of those possible answers as correct, right? So if it's something that could relate, to Descartes or to Molière, if you give me either answer and just explain how it's relevant to that particular text, I'll accept it. You don't have to give me all the possible answers. So if you can relate it to one text, that's fine. Anything else? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so going back to the example with Pangloss, I said, he was used as an example of tearing down the philosophy. If I say it like that and not exactly say the buzzwords, what the philosophy was and stuff like that, will I get points taken off or will it be sufficient?
Yeah, I would say you don't have to know all of the buzzwords, but you should know sort of the basic orientation that Voltaire is trying to take down, if that makes sense. Okay, anything else? All right, then let's try to get back to the story of the stone. All right, so who wants to start us off here with a question or a comment or anything at all?
A question.
Okay, question, go for it.
On page 565.
Yes.
And, talking about when she went to visit Mother Jaya.
Uh-huh.
Grandmother Jaya had retired from her afternoon nap. Some of the maids had sneaked off to play, and some were having 40 winks themselves. What does that mean? 40 winks.
40 winks, oh, they're napping. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I
they're just
didn't
going
catch
off to,
that.
yeah, they're just going off to have a nap,
Also,
yeah.
what's up, courtier? Because right
Where
below that
is-
is talking about, and it mentioned it earlier before.
Okay, let's see, I can't actually find the passage you're talking about. You say it's in 565?
Yeah, where it starts with the nightingale could see that her mind was utterly confused in that paragraph, at the bottom of that paragraph.
Okay, nightingale could say, okay, right. Sure, the swish of the portiere. I don't actually know what a portiere is. I think it's some kind of curtain.
Oh, I thought
Yeah.
it was one of them sliding doors, but I wasn't sure, because you know how
Yeah.
in Asia they have those.
I don't think it's really something that's really all that important
Okay,
to know.
I was
But it's-
confused by some of the terms in this, and it's simple-minded.
Yeah, Ash, go ahead.
I have a very silly question. Like on 564,
Uh-huh.
when Dai Yu is talking to the maid,
Yes.
I realize, like, reading through this, that all of the maids have thing names, like
Yeah.
Aroma and Nightingale,
Mhm.
and she's called Simple for comedic effect.
Right.
Are these translations of their Chinese names? Because only the important people have Chinese names.
These are translations of their Chinese names. Yeah, which because they're not aristocrats, are mostly just one word, right? So that's to sort of separate the characters by class. That's something the translator is doing, right?
I was
So,
wondering that.
yeah,
So much, yes.
all of the servant characters have these one-word names that largely refer to some sort of character, like they refer to their character in some way, right? All of the aristocrats have much more have longer, more complicated names, right? So if we remember last time, for example, what does Jia Bao Yu translate to?
False jade jewel?
False precious jade,
False
yes.
precious jade.
Now, a lot of these names also contain Chinese language puns. Yu in Chinese means jade, but it also means, if you say it with a slightly different inflection, desire. So Jia Bao Yu is both false precious jade and false precious desire. Now, Lin Dai Yu, her name translates, I don't actually know what Lin translates to, but Dai Yu translates to black jade or black desire. Now, why might the name false or illusory be appropriate for Jia Bao Yu?
Because, like, in the end, his feelings for Dai Yu were inconsequential. She was like just this little bump on his way to enlightenment.
Yeah, she's an earthly tie, right? An earthly desire. Though their fates are actually tied together in various complicated spiritual ways, which, again, more on that in a moment. But is Jia Bao Yu really a person?
No.
No, he's not.
Yeah, he's essentially a piece of sentient jade transformed for a time into a person, right? So that bit we have near the very beginning here, where the Taoist Vanitas is reading this inscription on the jade, right? The rest of the novel is the inscription that Vanitas is reading. Right, so we're put in the position as readers of this Taoist who finds this big piece of jade with writing all over it on a mountain, reading this very, very, very long story.
And all this is written on this little bitty jade rock?
It's not so little bitty when Vanitas finds it. It's much bigger than it was, yeah. But we do know that it can change its shape, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, right, this Buddhist and this Taoist, they got together, they picked up this sentient piece of jade, they put it into the stream of souls about to be born, and it gets incarnated as a human being. Right? And so, what we get in the remaining 119 so chapters of the novel is Jia Bao Yu, the stone, right, false precious jade, experiencing life as a human being. Yes?
So, this, the monk or whatever that's reading this,
Mm-hmm.
is it after he's died and he finds the stone, or is it before he's made into a human?
This is all in the past now, right?
Okay.
The whole narrative, the whole part that's after Vanitas finding and reading the stone, this is all in the past. This is all stuff that's already happened, right? It's all these events are inscribed. The story is inscribed on the stone.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
and so
starting to get it now.
yeah, so we're basically Vanitas reading this story on the stone. All right, everybody still with me?
Yes.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
want to draw a picture.
Yeah, and like I said, this is a really complicated and really confusing text, right? We talked last time about those kind of metafictional elements of it, where in a lot of ways it's about the writing of fiction. It's about the writing of writing a story, telling a story, and that the logic of a novel like this tends to be kind of associative rather than linear, right? It's you link up concepts from particular episodes rather than following a linear plot. Yeah, Ash, you had a hand up. What were you going to ask?
On page 573,
Uh-huh.
when Value dies
Yeah.
or whatever, and he goes to what I can only associate to purgatory,
Uh-huh.
when he's talking to the shade thingy.
Right.
That's the only thing I know how to describe it as.
Uh-huh.
And he's talking about Lindayu, and he says that Lindayu was no ordinary mortal. In the first part of the story,
Mm-hmm.
there was a magic flower.
Yes.
Was she the magic flower?
She is the magic flower, yes. So, yeah, in the spirit world before they're born as humans, right, the jade stone befriends the crimson pearl flower, right? Jia Bao Yu is the stone, and Lin Dai Yu is the flower. This will all make a little bit more sense, I hope, if I explain a little something to you about Taoist alchemy and how they felt different substances interacted with each other, right? So, how many of you are familiar with the concept of the four elements? Okay, yeah, earth, air, fire, water, right? And this is how certain ancient Greek philosophers believe. These are the substances certain ancient Greek philosophers believed everything in the world was formed out of. Now, we apply the term elements sometimes to the Wu Jing, these five Taoist processes, really. Again, because we don't have a closer cultural analogy. But what they're looking at is the way substances in the world interact with each other, right? So Wu Jing literally translates to something like five processes. And the five Wu Jing are wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. And the first set of relationships among these is what are called generative relationships. And that sort of goes along the outside of the circle. So wood feeds fire. Fire, when burned, becomes ash, earth. Earth bears metal, which can then be dug out of it. Metal contains water, and water feeds wood. right? So this circle of substances feeding on each other, right? Creating each other, generating each other. Now, within the circle, there are what are called overcoming relationships. And this works a little bit like a kind of rock, paper, scissors sort of thing, you know, right? Rock smashes scissors, paper covers rock, right? So wood, for example, separates earth, right? Roots dig into the earth and split earth apart. Fire melts metal. Water quenches fire. Metal chops wood. So we have another square of relationships within that outer circle. You know, the outside they generate each other, inside they destroy each other. So if we're talking about Lin Dai Yu as the crimson pearl flower and Jia Bao Yu as the sentient jade stone, what kind of relationship from the perspective of Taoist alchemy do they have? What element would the jade seem to correspond to?
It would be earth. Oh, what?
Mhm.
Yeah, it would be earth.
Yeah, it's earth. It's a stone. Good. And what about Jin Bao Yu? Pardon? She's a flower.
It's still earth.
Wood.
Yeah, exactly. It's not an exact sort of thing. Or any plant falls under the category of wood, basically. So yeah, the flower falls into the category of wood.
She destroys him.
Yeah, wood overcomes earth. Wood splits up, wood separates earth. So this is, from a Taoist standpoint, a destructive relationship, right? Now, one thing to remember again about Buddhism and Taoism both right? What's the end goal in Buddhism?
To leave the cycle of reincarnation and achieve nirvana.
Yeah, okay, so essentially to transcend earthly existence, right? To leave it all behind. To transcend the material world and become a sort of pure spirit thing merged with the cosmos, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
What about Taoism?
To become immortal.
Yeah, to be essentially to transcend natural limitations, right? You're not necessarily trying to dissipate yourself into the universe, but you are trying to transcend nature. By extending your life, becoming an immortal. So both of these religions are essentially about overcoming. And how does that make them different from the Confucian tradition?
They're not rational.
It's
Oh.
earthly desires.
Confucius, he embraces it and
Mhm.
strives to be better himself.
Yeah,
They abandon everything.
exactly. Yeah. Confucianism is about embracing the world and making yourself a part of it. It's about your relationships within it. Taoism and Buddhism are both, to varying extents, about rejection of the world. So, when Bao Yu achieves his salvation at the end of the novel, which of the three paths has he taken?
Buddhism.
Okay, why did you say Buddhism?
Because after he went to like purgatory and got told that he'll never see Dai Yu again if he
Yeah.
holds on to it, he like wakes up, decides that, hey, this lady I didn't really want to marry isn't so bad, and he eventually decides that he'll honor his earthly family, but after that he'll drop everything so he can transcend. Or that's what I thought.
But the one thing we have to remember about Bao Yu too, though, is what he is, right? Can he really transcend earthly existence?
Yes.
He's a stone, right? He's a sentient stone. He's not really a human being. So, there is a Buddhist element to what happens with him, right? But is it a purely Buddhist thing? He's also got to overcome certain other physical ties, right? Other physical attachments in making himself immortal stone tablet up on mountain. And he does so, right? What does he do before he exits the world?
He grabs his jade and he leaves.
Grabs his jade and he leaves, right? Before that even.
Oh, he takes the imperial exam?
He takes the imperial examination and does really, really well, right? Comes in 7th. Good for you. Especially for somebody who had, by all accounts, been a shitty scholar all of his life, right? No interest in books, no interest in study, not someone that his family really thought was going to do that well. And then he takes the examination, he comes in 7th, and gone, right? Why does he wait until after he is placed so well in the examination to leave?
So that he could help his earthly family.
Yep, one of the most important concepts in Confucianism is what's called filial piety. Right? The duty of a child to his or her parents. Right? The debt of gratitude that a child owes to parents for nurture and care, right? And Confucius stresses this like whether your parent has been good or bad, right? If you've had a good parent, if you had a bad parent, right, you owe the bad parent as much loyalty and respect as you would owe a good parent, because that's your place in the natural order of things, right? It's not your place to judge your parents' behavior, right? It is your place to love and nurture and support them, regardless of how they behave towards you. So filial piety is really kind of one of the key central concepts in Confucian belief. So he has to do right by his grandmother, by his mother, by his father, before he can go back to just being a stone on a mountain, right? So, to what extent can we say that he's taken just one path?
I think you took all 3.
Yeah, we've got elements of all 3. Now, why would that be? Why is that necessary in terms of the way the narrative is set up? He's been pulled out of his existence as a stone by a Buddhist and a Taoist and placed in a Confucian family. What did Mysterioso and Impervioso slip him into the stream of souls being born in order to experience?
Human life?
Yeah. And human life is not necessarily about following a single path to a single predetermined goal, right? In order to experience the richness and fullness of human existence, Bao Yu follows 3 separate paths that all ultimately get him to the same place. All right, so is this making any more sense to you yet? Yeah, Ash, go ahead.
Like the whole thing with Bao Yu and him being a rock and not really being a person makes
Right.
sense, but is this supposed to be a parody or is this supposed to be like some sort of actual serious religious thing? Or is this like Chinese Candide? Like,
You know, I would say the answer to both questions is yes. There is a satirical element to this, right? Let's think a little bit back to Tuesday's material, right? What was the most popular genre of literature called around the time Cal was writing? Yeah, these literati novels, right? What else were they called? Scholar beauty, yeah, exactly. Right, named for the 2 main types of characters in these narratives. Right, now by literati, what do we mean when we're talking about literati? What does this word really refer to? Yeah, Confucian scholars. So all of these guys who, for example, surround Bao Yu's father in the garden are literati. What happens in a scholar beauty novel? What's the usual pattern? Okay, meet in a garden. And we don't really get a sense of this because of the way this is excerpted, but most of the story of the stone takes place within this prospect garden that Bao Yu, went through with his father, naming things and coming up with little poems for it. Like the garden is a kind of escape from the world. So they meet in a garden and pledge their love, right?
You have to do well in the incredible exam.
Yep. The scholar must do well in imperial exam.
and doesn't he like always magically make number 1?
Oh yeah, yeah. He can't come in number 2 or number 3. He always wins, right? He always gets the top prize, right? Best examination. Good for you, buddy. Well done. And then what happens? How do these novels end?
Emperor job.
Yep.
Marries them.
Yep, emperor gives him a job. Scholar marries beauty. And everybody lives happily ever after. And isn't that just hunky-dory and syrupy and disgusting? All right. So we looked at how this was parodying that convention in the episode with Dai Yu Lin, right, at the beginning of the novel, where he looks into the garden and sees the pretty girl there, and she looks back at him and he's like, ah, she must recognize my genius.
So whatever happens to him, though? Like,
He becomes a tutor
so
in
they just
the
leave
in the
that.
Jia family.
Okay.
So yeah, he never sees that girl again. Yeah. He loses all interest in Zhen Shiying's household once Zhen Xiyin gives him the money to go and take the imperial examination. Right, so our first scholar, our first literati here, right, is basically an ingrate. Now, do we see these conventions pop up again? If this was a scholar beauty novel, how ideally would it end?
They would have, gotten married and been happy.
Yeah. Jia Bao Yu would score very, very high on the imperial examination, and he and Lin Dai Yu would marry and live happily ever after, right? So what actually happens?
Lin dies.
Yeah, Lin dies for one thing.
He gets 7 in the phone.
Yeah, he gets 7th, which is still really good, considering that his nephew comes in 131st. And also considering how lousy a scholar he'd been. And the emperor is looking for him, right? The emperor wants to give him a job. But he's nowhere to be found because he's already checked out once he's fulfilled his duty to his family.
So he dies.
Pardon?
He dies.
Well, I mean, can a stone actually die?
I don't get what happens.
Let's look at the last time we see Dai Yu. All right, chapter 120. Let's start on page 580. All right, the family's fortunes have been restored. Jia Zheng, Jia Baiyu's father, has been given, a very good and important post. Jia Zheng had arrived in Nanking with grandmother Jia's coffin, accompanied by Jia Rong and the coffins of Qin Shi, Feng, Dai Yu, and Faithful. Right? Lots of people die near the end of the novel. They made arrangements for the Jia family members to be interred, and then Jia Rong took Dai Yu's coffin to her own family graveyard to be buried there, while Jia Zheng saw to the construction of the tombs. Then one day, a letter arrived from home, in which he read of the success achieved by Dai Yu and Jia Lan in their examinations, which gave him great pleasure, and of Dai Yu's disappearance, which disturbed him greatly and made him decide to cut short his stay and hurry home. On his return journey, he learned of the amnesty decreed by the emperor and received another letter from home telling him that Jia Shi and cousin Zhen had been pardoned and their titles restored. Much cheered by this news, he pressed on towards home, traveling by day and night. So in a lot of ways, we are getting a conventional ending here where everything turns out well for the family and for the hero. Yeah, go ahead, Ash.
So when Jiaji and cousin Zhen get pardoned, they're getting pardoned for being these are the same two people who were the weird Taoists who would go outside and mingle with other Taoists.
These are
different people.
No, these are members of Jia Zheng's family.
Okay.
Who have not otherwise been mentioned in the excerpts. But yeah, so suffice it, they had been accused and convicted of corruption. And so kicked out of their posts. And now they're pardoned, and it looks like we're going to have our fabulous Deus Ex Machina ending, where the emperor, much like Louis XIV and Tartuffe, just comes in and fixes everything, right? But he can't because Dai Yu is gone. Dai Yu has absented himself from the scene. On the day when his boat reached the post station at Piling, there was a sudden cold turn in the weather and it began to snow. He moored in a quiet, lonely stretch of the canal and sent his servants ashore to deliver a few visiting cards and to apologize to his friends in the locality, saying that since his boat was due to set off again at any moment, he would not be able to call on them in person or entertain them aboard. So what do we notice Jia Zheng, the father, always does wherever he goes? What sorts of obligations does he always obey? What about him seems particularly Confucian in the way we've sort of discussed Confucianism?
He always writes letters to home.
He always writes letters home. He always keeps up with what's going on at home.
He also looked for his mother's approval.
Looks for his mother's approval, practices filial piety, and is very much concerned about his place in the social order, right? He's always fulfilling social obligations, right? I'm sorry I can't come and visit you. I'm not here long enough, but I'm sending you a visiting card anyway, right? To let you know that I was here and that I thought of you. Aren't I nice? Only one page boy remained to wait on him while he sat in the cabin writing a letter home to be sent on ahead by land. When he came to write about Dai Yu, he paused for a moment and looked up. There, up on deck, standing in the very entrance to his cabin and silhouetted dimly against the snow, was the figure of a man with shaven head and bare feet, wrapped in a large cape made of crimson felt. The figure knelt down and bowed to Jia Zheng, who did not recognize the features and hurried out on deck, intending to raise him up and ask him his name. The man bowed 4 times, and now stood upright, pressing his palms together in a monkish greeting. Jia Zheng was about to reciprocate with a respectful bow of the head, when he looked into the man's eyes and with a sudden shock, recognized him as Dai Yu. "Are you not my son?" he asked. The man was silent, and an expression that seemed to contain both joy and sorrow played on his face. Jia Zhang asked again, "If you are Bao Yu, why are you dressed like this? And what brings you to this place?" Before Bao Yu could reply, 2 other men appeared on the deck, a Buddhist monk and a Taoist, and holding him between them, they said, "Come, your earthly karma is complete. Tarry no longer." The 3 of them mounted and strode off into the snow. Jia Zhang went chasing after them along the slippery track, but although he could spy them ahead of him, somehow they always remained just out of reach. He could hear all 3 of them singing some sort of a song. "On green sickness peak I dwell, in the cosmic void I roam. Who will pass over, who will go with me? Who will explore the supremely ineffable, vastly mysterious wilderness to which I return?" Jia Zhang listened to the song and continued to follow them until they rounded the slope of a small hill and suddenly vanished from sight. He was weak and out of breath by now with the exertion of the chase, and greatly mystified by what he had seen. So when he's trying to chase them, when he's trying to catch up with them, what direction are they moving in?
Forward?
Where are they going? They're going forward, right? They rounded the slope of a small hill and suddenly vanished from sight. They're going up.
Nirvana?
But you would turn back into a stone.
Bao Yu's going to turn back into a stone, right? But his father's never going to know that because he can't catch up with them. Why can't Jia Zhang catch up with the monk, the Taoist, and his son?
Because he's just human.
Yeah, they're leaving the world behind. They're taking Bao Yu out of the world. Jia Zhang, as good a Confucian as he is, right, is very much a creature of the world. And so he can't go where they're going. Confucianism doesn't really offer any kind of path to transcendence or overcoming, right? It's all about operating within your limited sphere, right? Finding your own place within the existing celestial order. It's not about getting out of it, right? So the Buddhists and the Taoists are taking Bao Yu back out. And they're going to put him up on that mountain with his long inscription.
So, like, essentially, they're so unweighed by the world that they're faster in a way than the father, who's so weighed down by his familial and worldly obligations that he physically can't keep up.
Yeah, they're not just unweighted, right? They're transcendent. They're not really of the world to begin with. Right? As partly evidenced by the fact that they never seem to change, right? They're more or less the same now that they were when they first took that piece of jade and shoved it into the stream of souls to be born. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I keep
No,
asking.
yeah, please do.
But so the monk and the Taoist, and then, like, I was confused about it to begin with, but were they the 2 scabby-headed monks at the very beginning, like roaming through and pointing at people?
Oh yeah,
Because they were following along for funsies. At least that's what I assume.
yeah. It's the same people throughout. Yeah, and they've been keeping track of Bao Yu and his social connections and sort of the life they've injected him into.
Haven't they also kind of been pulling the strings a little bit and manipulating things?
Okay, what suggests manipulation to you?
Like, they won't, like Dai Yu, Lin Dai Yu says that when she first comes to the house, to the Jia household, she said that a monk had pointed at her when she was little. And I think I may be wrong, but was Lin the little baby at the very beginning?
No, that's
Okay.
not. Yeah, that
That was
actually,
just-
yeah, that little baby doesn't come back into our excerpts at all.
Okay, so she was just
Yeah.
a random little baby. But she got pointed at and by like a scabby, crazy monk who said that she needed to be a nun and that she would just die unhappily if she wasn't stared at by her parents forever. And like they tried to like, I don't know whether or not it was just them inserting themselves and knowing that this would not happen, or them actively trying to like stop things from happening.
Yeah, they do run around and prophesy, right? There are other moments sort of in the longer narrative where they step in and intervene as well. For example, they show up at a point where Bao Yu is sick and dying because he's lost his jade pendant. And they give it back to him, which restores him. So they do interfere. Not frequently, but enough to suggest that there is sort of some hand at work moving things that is not just random chance. So they are trying to move Bao Yu towards a particular goal.
Like, I'm kind of wondering, like, maybe I'm thinking too far into this because I'm kind of still a little tiny bit confused, but did they, like,
that's fine.
make him human in the first place so he actually could experience this, or was it just, ha ha ha, let's see what happens? Because it kind of feels like it was half that, and, like, hot half, let's see what happens, I'm bored.
Okay, so you sort of feel like there's a kind of like the joke's on Bao Yu
Yeah.
kind of
I mean,
element
like,
to this?
like, he goes through so much torment. Like, the Crimson Pearl Flower, Dai Yu,
Sure.
that he had feelings for, even though it was, like, tragic or whatever happens.
Right.
And they said she was going to die. It was always going to happen. They didn't come and tell him. They didn't try and interfere, even though they have interfered to begin with.
Sure.
So he
But-
just went through this. Sorry.
Go ahead.
So he just went through this life of, like, being abused by his dad, because even when he was sick and dying, his dad came in, and he only went as an obligation to his mom, looked at his son, who was basically dying, went, oh, that's gross, and left. So he was, like, abused, and then had to go for the love of his life dying, and then he kind of just settled until he could transcend.
Okay. Well, if we think about, like, sort of the idea that the stone, right? What was the stone at the very beginning? What brought Bao Yu the stone that would become Bao Yu into existence in the first place?
It was being made by that goddess Wu something to repair the sky.
Yep. The goddess Nuwa made these bricks to repair the sky, right? And what's Bao Yu? What's Bao Yu's role in that?
He was a misshapen stone left behind.
He's not misshapen. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with the stone. It was just one extra, right?
Yeah.
So he's a stone without a fit, without a purpose. And so to give him some sort of sense that his existence has not been completely pointless or completely purposeless, they push him into the human world, where he experiences, to the fullest extent possible in 19 years, human life. Now, is the experience of human life always is it or should it be always an entirely pleasant one? Yeah, bad things happen, right? People suffer. Suffering is part of it's part of human life. It's part of human existence. So they don't interfere to stop him from suffering because they want him to experience all possible levels of human existence. Now the thing with Lin Dai Yu was sort of allowing Lin Dai Yu to wither and die, right? Again, remember that Taoist elemental relationship there, right? That, wood overcomes earth. Wood has a destructive effect on earth. So in order to transcend, he has to break that tie. Right? Bao Yu, the stone, can't survive while the crimson pearl flower is digging her roots into him. Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay.
But, like, we talked about the other day about, like, yin and yang, and how we acknowledged that Lin Dai Yu was, like, perfectly yin, and, like, Bao Yu was basically perfectly yang.
Right.
So, like, her as wood digging into his stone, would you meant that it would have kept him to the physical world and made him more earthly? Because, like, we basically acknowledged the other day that they would have probably evened each other out. Or
Well, that's sort of what the shade implies at the end of the novel, right? Is that, yeah, stop thinking about Lin Dai Yu, because she's the thing that is tying you to your earthly existence. And if you don't want your soul burned and purged in the hells, then, you know, keep your mind on your business, friend. But yeah, it's yeah, and another thing that we have to remember here, right? Also, these last few chapters that we read, were these part of the original plan of the novel? No, they were not, right? Xueqin, as far as we know, died before he finished the novel. So these last chapters were added by someone else.
Ah.
By the, you know, the person who first published the novel, right? We know that Cao's original story of the stone had been circulating in manuscript amongst people he knew for several years. And by about 1790, and about 45 years after Cao died, then this guy Gao A took Cao's manuscript, added another 40 chapters to it, and published it. So what we have, if things in these last few chapters don't seem to perfectly match up to things that we read for last time, yes, some of that is the fact that this is a composite text written by two different people at two different times.
So it's essentially Frankenstein's monster.
Not quite. Well, if Frankenstein's monster was just like an extra leg sewn onto a body, then yeah, that's not a bad analogy. All right. Anybody have any other questions about this? All right. I hope that we don't feel more confused now than we did when we came in. All right. So.